Now we all love Metroid Prime, that big, bad, super mutated Metroid from the first Prime game. A very devastating creature that causes chaos and destruction throughout the entire Prime trilogy. Although the exact origins of Metroid Prime has always been kind of a source of confusion due to some retcons that many people aren't really aware of. So for today's video, I'd like to explain what was retconned and what's canon, explain the origins of Metroid Prime, and figure out the origins of the Metroid that became Metroid Prime, and hopefully shed some light on this situation as best as I can. So let's get started. Again, the origins of Metroid Prime has kind of been muddied up due to contradicting stories we've seen between the North American and PAL versions of Metroid Prime on GameCube. The North American version states that the Metroid Prime was already on the Leviathan Seed before it impacted Talon 4. The Space Parts actually captured the creature and studied it before it escaped, stole some of their technology to make its armor, and returned back to the Leviathan Seed. While the PAL version doesn't really mention much about Metroid Prime, only stating that when the Space Parts were studying the impact crater, they noticed a strong life signature inside the core, and that they were interested in finding out what it was, making Metroid Prime much more mysterious and unknown. Now, I couldn't really find a reason for why these two versions of the game had completely different data log entries, and during the GameCube era, there was really no official statement stating which one of these two games was the official canon one. Thankfully, with the release of the Metroid Prime trilogy a couple years later, it established that the PAL version was the canon version. Since all regions of the Prime trilogy used the PAL versions of the data log entry, this effectively retconned the North American version of the Metroid Prime game. So with the official information that we're given, this is the general backstory of Metroid Prime. A long time before the events of the first Prime game, there was a colony of Chozos who lived on Talon 4, and they prophesized the worm destroying their homeworld. Some time passes and a Leviathan Seed from planet Phase impacts Talon 4, destroying a lot of their ecosystem, corrupting a lot of their creatures, and killing off a lot of the Chozos. The remaining Chozos took it upon themselves to create the Cradle, an impenetrable barrier around the impact crater, preventing a lot of Phazon from destroying the planet, although this didn't necessarily stop the Phazon as it was still seeping out of the cradle and slowly killing the planet as opposed to a quick corruption. Some time passes, many Chozos died off, and a couple Chozos actually left the planet searching for a new home. Decades after the last Chozo died, the Space Pirates would discover Talon 4, noticing a very unique energy signature on the planet. They would discover Phazon, set up their Space Pirate base on the planet, and start experimenting with the Phazon substance. Some time passes and they were studying the impact crater, trying to figure out a way to get past the impenetrable cradle, and they noticed a very unique life signature inside the impact crater. The Space Pirates wanted to find a way inside the cradle to not only gain access to a wide source of Phazon, but also discover what on Earth was living inside the impact crater. Again, the official information on Metroid Prime is very vague and doesn't really give too many concrete answers over where Metroid Prime came from and all that sort of stuff. Although, we can look at the entire trilogy and the entire series of Metroid as a whole, and rule out a couple of misconceptions people had over the possible origin of Metroid Prime. A pretty common misconception that people tend to have is that the Chozos from Talon 4 or the Chozos from Elysia created the Metroids, and one of the Metroids they created became Metroid Prime. It's a pretty common idea because it is true that the Chozos did create the Metroids, but it was specifically the SR-388 Chozos with the help of the Zebes Chozos. We see this with the manga and in Samus Returns. The Chozos from Talon 4 or Elysia had no involvement with the process whatsoever, and on top of that, the Metroids were created specifically with the sole purpose of exterminating X-Parasites. Talon 4 was a peaceful planet. There was no presence of X-Parasites whatsoever, so the Talon 4 Chozos wouldn't have any reason to create their own Metroids. Despite this, people have also assumed that maybe the Talon 4 Chozo could have created Metroids as a way to combat that worm they prophesized, but we also know that this isn't the case. The Chozo prophesized that Samus Aran would be the one to defeat the Metroid Prime, and they left upgrades for her to be able to defeat this creature. So the Talon 4 Chozo making Metroids in a way to combat the worm they prophesized wouldn't make any sense since they knew that Samus would be the one to defeat it. Another misconception is that people assume that the Metroid that became Metroid Prime came from planet Phase. Again, as stated earlier, the Metroids come from SR-388, that is their homeworld. Having Metroids come from planet Phase would be too much of a contradiction to what's already been established about the Metroids. The most probable reason for why there's Metroids on planet Phase when we visit it during Metroid Prime 3 is because it's more than likely that Dark Samus controlling the Space Pirates took some of their Metroids onto planet Phase to create more of her kind. So if the Talon 4 or Elysia Chozos didn't make their own Metroids, and if the Metroid didn't come from planet Phase, Then where did that Metroid that became Metroid Prime come from? Well, to explain the most likely solution, we gotta start from the very beginning. Before the events of the first game, the Galactic Federation discovered the planet of SR-388 and they capture a Metroid on that planet to study it. However, the space pirates intercept that ship and steal their Metroid and take it to Zebes with Mother Brain so she can create her Metroid army. The Galactic Federation hires Samus to go on the planet of Zebes, defeat Mother Brain, defeat her Metroid army, and restore peace of the galaxy. Samus was successful in destroying all the Tauren-based Metroids and defeating Mother Brain, but we learned in Metroid Prime that there was actually 3 frigates orbiting around Zebes during the events of this game. The frigate Orpheon, the frigate Seracius, and the frigate Volparagam. The space pirates actually took a bunch of Metroids from the Tauren base and boarded these creatures as cargo upon these frigates. Upon the Tauren base blowing up, these 3 frigates were able to actually escape without the Galactic Federation noticing them. We don't know anything about the whereabouts of Volparagam or Seracius, but we do know that the frigate Orpheon went to the Vortex outpost and then went to Talon 4, noticing a very interesting energy source on that planet. Upon discovering Phazon, the space pirates actually set up a base of operations on Talon 4, starting to experiment with the mutagenic substance, seeing what they can do with it. However, we do see in later data log entries that the space pirates don't really handle the Metroids pretty well. Multiple instances of Metroids attacking their handlers, killing their handlers, fleeing and being put down has been reported multiple times. With how poor the space pirates were managing the Metroids, it's safe to say that a Metroid more than likely escaped their captivity, coming across a bit of Phazon that oozed out of the cradle and more than likely mutating to a Phazon Metroid. While all the other Metroids in captivity will slowly adjust to the environment, becoming Talon 4 Metroids, the mutated Phazon Metroid will seek out more Phazon as Metroids are very gluttonous with energy sources, and since Phazon Metroids have the ability to phase through objects, it's more than likely that the Metroid was able to phase through the cradle and gain access to the Phazon core. Absorbing more Phazon, the Metroid will mutate again, becoming a Hopper Metroid. But upon mutating, it loses its ability of teleportation, meaning it's now trapped inside the cradle. With not much to do, the Metroid would just absorb more and more and more Phazon, mutating even further and more aggressively, becoming what we see as Metroid Prime. And that is the most likely origins of the Metroid that became Metroid Prime. And finally, what happened to Metroid Prime? After Samus explores Talon 4, gathers all the keys to get past the cradle, and gets access to the Phazon core, she comes across the Metroid Prime. After battling with the Metroid Prime for some time, she actually forces the Metroid Prime to remove its exoskeleton, revealing the Metroid Prime core. Using the power of Phazon, Samus was actually able to wound Metroid Prime greatly, reverting it into a weird state. However, at a last second effort, either to save itself or to kill Samus, the Metroid Prime core latches onto Samus, attempting to pull her into the Phazon. Samus was able to successfully escape, but the Metroid Prime was able to rip away her Phazon suit. Samus was able to escape the collapsing Phazon core. We assume that the Metroid Prime is dead. However, later on, we see in the secret ending that the Metroid Prime actually survives, fusing itself with the Phazon suit, as well as a little bit of Samus's DNA to form Dark Samus. But we'll talk about Dark Samus more in a different video. There we go, a video explaining Metroid Prime. What I want to know is what do you guys think? Did you learn something new about the origins of Metroid Prime? Were you aware of the retcons about the North American GameCube version of Metroid Prime? Was all this common knowledge to you? Whatever you think, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. And if there's any other bosses or villains or baddies you want explained in Metroid, feel free to tell me in the comment section. And special shout out to the people in my Discord who helped me brainstorm this video. The origins of Metroid Prime was pretty confusing and I was having a lot of trouble trying to structure this video out. So being able to talk this out was really helpful. So if you want to join, link in the comment section below. If you like this kind of content, feel free to click on the video above. It's a video talking about Proteus Ridley, explaining his origins, explaining his appearance, and explaining how this affects games like Super Metroid. So if you're interested, feel free to click on that. With that being said, I'm the Metroid Trainer. I hope you like, favorite, subscribe, and stick around for next time because I'll be seeing you later.